Savannah Cathers. I'm a nonprofit professional and a theater professional. And here at Sisters in the Round, we are dedicated to fostering an inclusive and empowering community within the theater industry, specifically taking a focus of intergenerational Black women. Its vision extends beyond traditional professional spaces and aims to create a vibrant community playground where informal and casual conversations can flourish. Today, I'm here in the round with Shaunda McDill, Managing Director of the Pittsburgh Public Theater. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm well, Savannah. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It was a long day. Had a bunch of like client dinners yesterday, so I was in a room as like just me. Like I was surrounded by so many blonde white women last night. I felt so alienated.
Wow. So what did you invite the people to the dinner, or what does that even look like?
My firm bought a table at the dinner and they invited me because my clients are in that room. And I didn't realize upon walking in that room, I'd be like one of 3 Black people in the room that wasn't catering staff. And I was like, huh.
We're out here.
We're out here. We're out here. We're trying to raise funds for something good, right? And at the same time, we gotta build these relationships. So yeah, I was reflecting on that last night, knowing that we would have this conversation today. Like, wow, I think Shauna's gonna have maybe some similar experiences of like hitting people up for money that don't look or like you, and sometimes fundamentally disagree with the things you value most in this world. So it's so interesting. Yeah.
Or I agree with you, but don't trust you with their money. So either way, all of those things. But yeah, it's okay. Because we have to, be in those spaces. So I just, take a moment to say thank you for mustering the courage that it takes to walk in those spaces, to stand in those spaces, to still show up and be yourself. Because the next person who has to step in that room, hopefully you've made such an impact that it won't be as difficult for them. Or there'll be more people in the room next time. So thank you, because that can be tough work, traumatic work, tiring.
Of course. I think it's worth it though. I think, what is it? Like the plight never changes, right? Like the 68 was not that long ago. And like those issues are still very much present today. They weren't like black and white 100 years ago. They were like recently. So we can't like sugarcoat that. Even in 2023, young nonprofit professionals will still have first-time experiences. It's interesting.
Yeah. And our ancestors are looking down, cheering us on, right? We're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. We're surrounded by divine ancestors who are saying somebody had to be the first,
Exactly.
I was just talking to my cousin. We were talking about a property in our family that we want to buy back. Our family had it for some extended period of time, but our generation wasn't ready. And, I'm like, if my great grandparents had a home that they were able to build themselves in the 70s after all the years, and probably not even, but one generation removed from slavery, they're looking at us like, y'all get it together, like what?
The ancestors are upset.
You're not facing nary what we were facing, and we were owning property back then, so it's like, there's a great history. There's a great legacy that is before us. And we have everything we need to move in power in those spaces, and to accomplish what we need to get accomplished.
Yeah. That concept of, just thinking about ancestors, and like, I feel as though I have this astute privilege to even have a theater degree, right? I don't have to focus on getting a degree that is a typical money-making degree. I'm allowed to create art, and that's a privilege in itself. And how I like our ancestors must be so proud and so happy that we can bring joy of human connection to this world.
And that we have choice, right?
Choice.
I mean, I think that's what real freedom is. It's like the freedom to say, you know, for me, it was like, I'm going to Dartmouth and I'm not going to be a lawyer or a doctor or this. I'm going and I'm studying Afro and African-American history and I'm going to minor in theater. And that was a choice that maybe many of them didn't even have. So, you know, I think part of it is just the freedom to choose for ourselves a direction and a purpose that is in alignment with what we truly believe we are on this earth to do. And so I think, and many of our ancestors were robbed of that, right? So,
So Shaunda, I'm kind of curious. So you mentioned what you got, that first choice you made, going to Dartmouth. How did that transition? Like, what does that through line look like to today? I know you mentioned that you were in philanthropy for a while, and here you are today as a managing director. Help me connect the dots.
So I think the first dot is being, you know, a middle school and a predominantly white school and about to be tracked, right? Put into the system of special education. My mother was like, oh no, right? So she sent me to a private school that my great-grandparents' Dr. Ewing, rest in peace, a Black man who was their physician back in the day, was like, there's this Quaker school, maybe put Shaunda in this friend's school. Luckily, when that school was ready to put me in special education, my mom chose to put me, not knowing how she was going to pay for it, into this Friends Academy. That changed my life. Dr. VA was a woman who was assistant headmaster who laid out these schools, you know, like, and actually was there to actively get us into college. It was a college preparatory school. So end up at Dartmouth. You know, for me, it was, you know, I applied to 17 schools. It was something crazy because I didn't think I was getting in anywhere. And I ended up getting into all of them. So that was what also crazy, except for one. I got waitlisted at a college that will remain unnamed, but Williams. But anyway, so I ended up, you know, then it was like money. Well, who's going to give me the most money? And, you know, the way that these algorithms work, pretty much I got the same package from everyone, except for schools that were going to give me sports scholarship. You know, I was did really well in shot put, in track and basketball and tennis. And so my mom was like, but you're going to go for your brain, because I don't want it to be taken from you if something happens, right? So again, this like generational mistrust, right? But anyway, ended up at Dartmouth. While I was there, they had the convening on Golden Pond. So not only did I become the head of the Black Underground Theater Association, it was passed down from Marsha Blake, who's a well-known artist now in the industry, and she and others passed it down to the leadership from year to year. But while I was there as a student, August Wilson was there in residence teaching playwriting. I took his class. We had a convening on Golden Pond. Ntozake Shange directed me on campus. Augusto Boal was there at a different point in time. So you had this convening of Black artists from across the globe because of Dr. Victor Leo Walker and others who wanted to convene based on August Wilson's speech at Princeton, the ground on which I stand. And so there was a call for this convening of artists, and I just happened to be a student in the right place at the right time. From there, I'll quickly just say that same professor was like, the Goodman Theater has an internship. You should go there. I packed my car, found a person on Craigslist to be a roommate with, and did an internship at the Goodman. At the same time, worked with Congo Square, which was starting to form by Derek Sanders. So I was in that Chicago community trying to find my way, working with Ntozake's sister, Ifa Baeza, on the premiere of Amistad. So just launched out and just started working. Sound op, this, that, whatever I could do. Those relationships led to other things. I ended up at Yale School of Drama via Second Stage directing fellowship, some other things, and ended up applying to Yale School of Drama at the time, is what it was called, and was accepted and went there. And so then from Yale, it was Cornerstone Theater Company, because I didn't want to go into the regional theater. And I thought that the work that they were doing was really meaningful because of Shea Wafer, Bill Rausch. Shea became a mentor. She ends up calling me to come to Pittsburgh many years later to work at the August Wilson African American Cultural Center. I moved here in 2010, and then the rest is kind of history. And all the while had my own theater company that I founded in 2006 called Damascus Theater Collective. And I was producing my own work, but also working at reputable theater companies. And so here we are. So now did 5 years in philanthropy at the Heinz Endowments as a program officer, helped to lead the Ford Foundation initiative around cultural treasures in Pittsburgh. and walked across the street and ended up taking a job at one of the groups that was formerly in my portfolio, the Pittsburgh Public Theater, when they were looking for a managing director. So that's a lot. I'm skipping, but here we are. Yeah.
Wow, that's quite okay. I think sorry. I'm still processing it. What a blessing to be at Dartmouth then.
Yes.
And then to be in Chicago during that time.
Yes.
Like those are the eras that I grew up studying about.
Yes.
Like, oh, the Chicago theater scene during this decade was like where you wanted to be. And especially coming from Atlanta, where art scene is like tragically on a pause button. Like,
wow.
So yeah, there was like a flight to Paris, I think, that had pretty much every artist in Atlanta, and that flight tragically crashed on its return flight. And so all of these producers, directors, and artists, like for Atlanta, gone. And so that's why the Woodruff Art Center looks like a mausoleum, because it's a memorial arts building to this plane crash.
I did not know that history. When did that happen?
In the 60s.
Oh my goodness.
And so like this whole time when I was growing up in the theater scene in Atlanta, we were on track to be Chicago. Let's study Chicago. And
wow.
And so seeing someone who did Chicago and did what I grew up learning about is so exciting. Were there definitely a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was in Chicago late 90s, early. So I graduated from Dartmouth in 99. So I was there like 2000, 2001, came home to New York for a bit, and then went to LA from like 2003 or 4 to 2007. But yeah, there was a great move happening in Chicago, and it was amazing to be there during that time. When the legends were starting, right? Congo Square I was taking notes for them at a restaurant, and I was there when they got their first business cards. Like Derek walked into the good, was like, here's our first, and I was there, and that really had to do with a good friend who had went to Howard with him, who was working in the business office at the Goodman, Tanika Fales. And so she looked out for me. I was young, broke, she would cook dinner and I would go over, and then she was like, I'm working with this theater company. You should meet them, and it was just like, so it's all about relationships, friendships, who people looking out for you. But yeah.
Shaunda, is there a moment of like wisdom or an interaction with someone that stood with you when you were building those relationships? Like, is there a moment that like kind of gave you some insight and advice that changed how you approached the next day? Kind of. No, that's a really loaded, heavy question.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many, you know what I'm saying? So when I was in Chicago, you had Irma P. Hall. Chuck Smith was directing Raisin in the Sun, and you had Irma P. Hall and Harry Lennox, and and so I remember just the buzz in the building when watching them do their work and forging relationships. If I'm honest about it, I probably would have never even made it to LA if it wasn't for someone like Harry Lennox saying, I can open up my home, right? Like, come sleep on the couch. Like, artists do this, and I was like, so there were these people who kind of like were there. Shay, sleeping on her couch. But I think, I have to say, it was less what they said and that I got to watch what they were doing, right? I got to watch the world premiere production of Amistad on stage and be in the sound booth doing the sound. I got to watch Congo Square actors and artists work through being an ensemble and trying to get the money. I got to really have a fundamental faith and belief in myself from the words that August Wilson himself spoken to us as students, or seeing him in the front row and I'm acting in Joe Turner's Come and Gone. You know, I'm an actress at the time, and learning all these things and just seeing him in the front row and like listening to him talk about the history and who we are and walking with that internally and seeing it modeled in front of you. I think that was the biggest gift. So I wish I could say one person, but so many people have, like, some people planted in my field, some people watered me, some people cultivated the soil. It was like a group of people feeding, you know, like.
Yeah. It's a community. It's not just one, it's not being in the right room this one time. It's being in the right room consistently and making sure that you're authentic in the relationships with every room you're in.
Yes. And you gotta make mistakes. Some relationships won't last and some will, and some, you know, but I would just say we should never take it for granted. We should never take those people for granted. I remember coming to Atlanta and for the Black Arts Festival, and I remember Wole Soyinka like sneaking in because he, you know, wasn't supposed to be in the country. I mean, like all these different moments. I remember, you know, Brandon Dearden and his now wife Crystal like doing Medea at Morehouse, and me walking on that set with them and their brother, you know, Brandon's brother, who's, you know, like these are all pieces, right? And so to see them succeed, you know, and just be doing the work and constantly just keep doing the work is like a really beautiful thing. So
let me pour some water so we don't get my water audio.
Stay hydrated. Yes.
Thank you. I just love the feel of like a good mug in my hand, even if it's just cucumber water.
Yes.
Yeah, it's doing the work, right? Some people just seem to flow into success, or of course be born into it. But it's like pulling, like we physically have to do it, and we can't take any moment for granted because our ancestors definitely didn't, and so
no. And like, my work is not your work, right?
Yeah.
I'm interested in your story. Like, how did you come to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I shared a bit of my timeline. Like, how did you get into, you mentioned you were in fundraising and, you know, this trajectory as an MD. I don't think that's, you know, always a charted path that Black women see for themselves, right?
Definitely. Yeah. So, I guess going back to that first dot, right, like you did, my dad is a sound engineer, and he would run sound for local bands. My dad is really into grungy rock, like I call it garage rock. It's crunchy. But specifically like live music. Like my dad had a thing for recordings, but he preferred live music. It really didn't matter the genre. And he was a single parent, so when he couldn't get a babysitter, he would bring me and my brother along. And so every weekend growing up, I realized live entertainment is horribly managed. Like, it shouldn't be this stressful to plug in your guitar and play a song. And I just, like, no matter how much planning happened, it would always be crunchy and not like a smooth process.
Right.
And so somehow I got involved in theater, and I learned about stage management. And I was like, oh, this is how you control the chaos that happens every Friday. I was like, oh, this works. And I'm a Capricorn. I'm an INTJ. I like my lists. I collected stationery. So it made sense. I was like, oh, I can watch art happen because I know I like seeing art happen. I love shared breath. And I can contribute the skills that I know I'm good with. I'm good with organizing. I'm good with analysis. So I went to school for a degree in stage management. I went to Brenau University, which is a women's college, but there's a local state university called the University of North Georgia, and the two of them both have theater programs that are combined. So that's where we got the male actors for our productions, and Brunel would provide the stages. And so the combination of these two universities had a theater program. Thought it was pretty good. A lot of boots on the ground effort, not a whole lot of classroom learning, more project based doing production learning. And so then did that. And then every summer I would do a summer stock. I would go either I went to the Illinois Shakespeare Festival for a bit, then I went to the Santa Fe Opera and then the Central City Opera.
Okay.
And as I was bouncing around, I kept recognizing these companies that I had inspired to like work at are horribly ran businesses.
Right.
Like it's one thing for me to be paid an internship $100 a week. It's one thing for my account to be negative and I'm stuck in Chicago one evening. But it's another thing when I can like see that it's not because I have an internship job, I can see that everyone is like living not as they should.
Yeah.
And Shaunda, I have this astute belief, and I think I apply this to my stage management as well. I want to remove every barrier possible to good art.
Yeah.
If that, so stage management wise, that's like making coffee, calling breaks, ensuring a safe space. Yeah. But like business wise, I want people to have insurance. I want them to be paid well. I want them to work in a good building. I want them not to be worried about their financial safety.
Yeah.
And once I realized that if good art comes from a stable job or like the ability to not, like if an actor can come and just do rehearsal with me and not have to worry about their shift afterwards, then like this is the best place for art to thrive.
Absolutely.
So then COVID happened. So I was working at the Boston Lyric Opera in Boston. COVID happened, and I decided to expedite my plans for the world, and I went to Columbia University and got my master's in nonprofit management.
Okay.
And so from there, COVID still happened, but I now knew how the business worked.
Yeah.
And so I got my job at the Alliance as the associate managing director, and I was his number 2 for a short stint. And I was doing it. I was seeing the days in and days out of what it took to run a regional theater, specifically a theater that I looked up to my entire life. Yeah. And then there's only so much growing up that can happen when you live in the city that you were born in. And I knew I was missing, there were parts of that job that I wouldn't be able to see. Like I didn't know jack shit about fundraising. And I knew that was a big aspect of the role. And philanthropy has a big role in the nonprofit sector, as most theaters are nonprofits.
Yeah.
So I decided that, and student loans. So I decided to press pause a little bit, because sometimes nonprofit jobs, you're just waiting on someone to leave, either on good terms or bad terms, before it opens up. And I didn't want to be in that position for years. So I took a job at a fundraising firm, and I've been managing multiple clients. I've been raising money, been hopping around both to arts organizations, human services organizations, some private schools, kind of like the ones you went to. And it's been a crash course. But sometimes when I made that first jump, I said to myself, oh, I'll just be a good theater patron. I'll make money and I'll give it back. But then in the past few months, my heart was like, no, you need to get back into that. I love the human connection so much. I love shared breath, and not being around that and just being in a room full of white blonde Catholics for dinner wasn't doing stop.
Fireworks.
It just wasn't doing it for me. So so yeah, here I am. I think one day I'll get back into theater. when I look for my next role. But like fundraising isn't the end all be all. It's I know this is a skill set I need to learn.
Critical. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I got here.
I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Of course, yeah, I know people don't really spend their whole lives thinking they're going to go straight into managing directing. Like no one sets up a career path like that.
No, people still ask me what I do. They're like, "Oh, you're what?" My mom just called me before this call. She saw someone. They were like, she was wearing an Actors Equity hat. They're like, "Oh, your daughter." She says she's a managing director. And then they say, "Oh, I had a friend who was there. They just retired from that same theater, but they were in administration." So my mom was like, "Shaunda, I didn't even say anything. I just kept walking. I don't think, okay, so yeah, managing director is the administrator, but it's like, people still do that. Like, oh, so I'm the managing director. Also, what show were you last singing in?" I'm like, no, I don't, that's not what I do. So it's like, there's still a lot of, even on staff, there are still staff members who are like, so what exactly do you do? So I just, I learned from some really powerful and extremely humble Black women. And so those kind of things don't bother me. I'm here to do the job. And like you thought for me, it was a good time to jump back in. Some people run from the fire, but the heroes run in. And so I'm like, it's time for me to return to the American theater. And because if there is a moment where we're going to reimagine what it is, this is the time. So,
Look at Oklahoma Shakes. Like we need more Black women in theater management, period.
Mm-hmm. So expound upon that, because I'm hearing so many stories, but I also don't want to assume people watching us know what is going on. Of course. Yeah.
So please correct me if I say it wrong. So the Oklahoma Shakespeare Festival, I think back in 2020, maybe even before then, hired a Black female artistic director. And I think it was immediately downhill from there. The board did not like her, the Board of Governors, the governance body for the theater, didn't like her season choice. Mm-hmm. I think $1 million pledge was rescinded, mm-hmm. and multiple of their largest donors backed away from the campaign that they were running at the time.
Oh, are you talking about Oregon Shakespeare?
Did I say Oklahoma?
Yeah, you said Oklahoma. Oh. So I'm like, well, what happened in Oklahoma?
Oregon.
Yeah. I was like,
yeah. Okay. Right. We'll cut that. Just think about Oregon Shakes.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
No, it's tough, right? Because again, we have not been in positions of leading in terms of governance, and in terms of the financing of the American Regional Theater. It just we haven't been there. And so now that these positions are opening up, I think we have to know as leaders a couple of things. Not only are we capable, I always say, like, I know how to manage something, right? Like my family, dollar out of 15 cents. Like, we're going to stretch the dollar. We're going to know how to make it. We're going to be creative, and think creatively about how to make things work with little. But we're also not saviors, right? So I'm not going to be the Black woman managing director who comes in and solves all the things. I don't have a cape. This is a job for me, just like it is for everyone else. I'm going to do the best I can with the skills that I'm given and with God's grace. And I'm here to serve and try to continue to make sure the Pittsburgh Public has another successful 50 years, if that's what's meant to be, right? Because I'm also not, like I said, a savior or have some sort of futuristic knowledge. And I think one thing in the American theater that we don't realize is, like, every organization is not meant to last in perpetuity. And I think, like, some things in an ecosystem rely on other things, and some things die off. And I think we're always, not really as comfortable with that part of evolution when we talk about an ecosystem or ecology. So at any rate, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have. I'm super excited about Mariah's vision and the team. Mm-hmm. And, believe that I am at that place for such a time as this. And I'm supposed to be doing and bringing what I have to offer there. So we'll see,
Yeah, I think that's the healthiest way to approach it. Because anything more is too narcissistic, and then anything less is anything less is like not doing it justice.
No, right.
And
Right.
like, yes, we aren't defined by our job titles, and yes, we're all multifaceted human beings, but like we still need to care a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I approach Thanksgiving and trying to plan for my family and see them, I realize, occupation is that, right? A job is a job. And we have not done a good job in American theater at all. And in theater, in the world of theater, really respecting people's bodies, their well-being, right? And so there's a great, phenomenal woman leader by the name of Lisa Yancey, who does a lot of work with foundations, and a lot of reports from Surviving to Thriving is one of the ones that she published from Yancey Consulting. And I recently was on a retreat with her called The Dash in Mexico, and she mentions time is our beloved partner, right? So even coming back to work after that vacation as a managing director, one of the things I used to hate in the American theater is watching the leadership nonstop. There was no stop. There was no off. You're constantly going. So even for me not to have email on my phone, or to on a Saturday have someone ask me a question and determine I'm not answering until Monday, or these are things that are unheard of in the American theater. But for me, and again, what we learned through COVID is like we weren't doing it right. You know what I'm saying? And all of that time and all that running around and all that didn't keep subscriptions from dying off, and all that time that you put in missing your family and not going home and not raising your kids and not caring for your family members or whatever, or yourself, did not help to sustain the American theater, all that. So we were sowing in the wrong places, I think. And so this is our opportunity to figure out the way we should be doing it, and I'm excited to be a part of that new process.
Definitely. Where do you think it's going?
I mean, the possibilities are endless. The possibilities are as vast as a woman named Savannah is going to bring to it, as vast as, I know where it's not going to go is into chaos again, right? For me. Yeah. So I think that just like you, I was like, oh, I started out acting, and I was like, I'm not going to be another conjurer, another nurse, I'm not doing it. And so who is the person who organizes the chaos of this lack of inclusion? Oh, that's a producer. I need to learn how to produce theater then. And I either will produce my own, or I'll work somewhere where I have the power to make decisions about what happens on the stage, because we have to actually fundamentally change that. So I don't know where it's going. I think some people are not making a change. They're just trying to really hold on and revert back to what they know. But I don't think that that's a way forward. And I think there are people like us who are saying, I know what it was, I know what it should be and can be, and I'm going to take some measured risks. Because the greatest risk is not making any change and going back to what it was, which was exclusive and not a reflection of all that it could be, and in some ways really mediocre, right? And so I think there's some extraordinary days ahead, and I'm hoping for at the public, extraordinary days ahead, because we're taking risks with, how we're structuring our organization and the values that we say we're going to work by and hold to them, and making inclusivity not just an extra department, but fundamentally the way that we work inside the organization, and not chasing grant dollars, but doing what's really purposeful and meaningful, and finding the partners that want to fund that. So I think there's some paradigms that I'm hoping we're going to shift.
No, I think I've got lots of thoughts, but I think it's all, like you said, it's just one person taking one step at a time. And I think the shifts that we want to see in the American theater as an industry are also very paralleling the shifts we want to see philanthropy make in general.
Absolutely.
And like, if we are going to move away from any ism that's creating this oppressive system that we're in right now, like it's not going to be a flip of a switch. I think if we take one step where we can, it's going to influence many different systems around us.
Absolutely. But I think, there is a saying, and I believe it was Alice Walker, like the greatest mistake people make with regard to power is believing that they don't have any, right? And the reality, and I used to feel this way in philanthropy too, a lot of people are waiting to do their work until they get that check from that foundation, or they're waiting to do the thing until they get this stamp of approval and this money, or they're waiting. And as you and I were talking about our ancestors, you know, what did they begin with? But they still made so much, right? We are the remnant, we are the thing, we are the legacy. And so they did so much with what they had, and they did not accept that the power that they had within them was insufficient to bring to the fore and bring to bear what it was that they thought that they could in this country. And they did not only did it for themselves, but they did it for people who oppressed them and for our whole nation, right? And so in my mind, I think, yeah, I know that the power, we are the gift to the American Regional Theater. The American Regional Theater is not equipped in its current structure to know what to do with us. But we are now in these spaces that can help to broaden and help to welcome others, and do so in a way that is compassionate and curious and joyous, and not built on some of the tenets and the principles that we experienced maybe as we tried to build careers in the past. So, you know, I look forward to walking through the doors of your theater when you're the managing director, seeing how you, what things you choose to tackle and do differently.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just in Pittsburgh recently, so I should have like connected the dots.
Come by. You
I know.
always have a place. Yeah, come by right down on Penn Avenue. Come downtown.
Oh, great. Oh, okay. Well, Shaunda, did you have any last advice for, I don't know, me or any other person any other Black woman that's just starting their career in theater? Oh, I know. I always ask loaded questions.
Well, first I want to thank Rajon. I mean, this is amazing, just being able to meet you and to know that now we're connected and that we can be a source for each other. And this space is so important. So this is one thing I want to just acknowledge and thank her and her team, and thank Shelby. And, you know, I don't know that I have, I guess, if I had some words of advice, I mean, there's so much, but what I would say is, you know, you are valued, you know, that you have a purpose that you are put here for. And that purpose should be rooted in love, you know, and that we shouldn't doubt ourselves, right? Because we know what love feels like. We know what goodness feels like. We know, so trust that you know what something feels like, but also be okay with being uncomfortable, because whether it's that room with all of the white women or other instances, or sometimes a room full of our own people where we're trying to navigate situations or may not, you know, wherever you are, you know that you are meant to be there, that there's a purpose for that moment. Trust what you know and believe. But I would also say, you know, remain in a position of servitude and remain curious and be okay with being uncomfortable, because on the other side of that discomfort is so much growth and possibility, and you'll walk out knowing so much more and being able to utilize it for the next thing that you're purposed to do. So just, you know, be gentle with yourself, trust yourself, and remain curious and remain rooted in love. And I feel like that's a lot, but I think working all those things together, you know, has worked for me and for me. And I wish for everyone else, like, to me, trusting God and my faith has been the key. Because when I didn't know, I could trust that there was a divine power that was guiding my footsteps. And even when I thought I knew, when it didn't work out that way, there was always a divine power guiding my footsteps. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been such a whirlwind of an hour, but I really appreciate finding this community with you. I feel less lonely in my path towards this job.
You're not alone. Whatever you need. Sometimes you just need a sample, a template, a document, whatever it is. Feel free. A moment on the phone, a cup of coffee. Just know that you have a place, you know, you have a place in Pittsburgh and, you know, a community for sure.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Absolutely.